Hi, this is Julie Bisbee from the Oklahoman. I'm here today with Richard Johnson, the chair of the Political Science Department at Oklahoma City University. And we're talking about the historic nature of this election. Tell me a little bit about what's at stake historically and how this election is different.
There are the obvious things and there are the potential things. The obvious things would be the role of gender in the campaign, the role of race, but there are also these sort of weighting factors. We know that Obama has had a tremendous impact on the youth, so this could be a historic year in terms of turnout. It could be a specific change in how youth interact with politics. It could be, I stress the could be, we won't know this till afterwards, what we call a critical or a change election, which significantly changes the tone and tenor of what's being talked about in Washington. For instance, 1980, Ronald Reagan, sort of liberal becomes a nasty word, those sorts of things.
How are the debates? How are they different than they've been in previous elections?
Well, that's really hard to say. I think that the difference between the two candidates is perhaps a little more marked. I think what people have noted is more the continuities and this dissatisfaction with the debates. I don't think that if you've listened to the news or you've listened to people talk, people come away feeling like their questions haven't been answered and maybe there's been too much of an emphasis on stylistic changes. You know, John McCain with his frowns and harumphs has been compared with Al Gore. That's not a good comparison. Maybe the biggest contrast that comes out of this is what one of the major news magazines called the cool one and the hot one, because of the different temperaments and which temperament would make a better president.
And are you surprised that there's so much discussion about that? I mean, I sort of am, because when George Bush ran, there were a lot of things that they could have compared and contrasted in the same vein, and now that's a huge issue.
I think the fact that we're in kind of the president has almost historic low approval rates, that there's so much dissatisfaction, especially with what has happened in the economy the last 6 weeks, that we're, instead of looking at somebody who's the same, or in 2000 perhaps we were guided by who would you rather have a beer with, or who do you connect with more on a personal level. Now we're looking for somebody who maybe has more what we might think of as more traditional leadership traits. Maybe we want the Franklin Roosevelt who has a calm and steady hand, and that would help Obama. Or if we want somebody who's fiery like Teddy Roosevelt, and McCain has often compared himself to TR.
Already I guess the candidacy is pretty historic.
Yes.
However it turns out, we're seeing more voter interest. I think 3.5 million registered voters, and that was in May, so I'm sure that has grown. What sort of different behaviors are you seeing among voters or different groups that may not have been engaged in previous elections?
Well, you really see the differences in the Afro-American community and among youth, and a lot of that's attributed to Obama, that Obama has this kind of magnetism. As a great speaker, John McCain was often talking about him as a celebrity as opposed to a leader. But there is something about Barack Obama that does seem to hit a lot of people. At the same time, McCain is a more traditional leader, but people appreciate his service to the country and his strong held beliefs.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of campaigning, I think I heard that Obama has spent more money on ads than any other candidate.
Almost every presidential cycle ends up being more expensive than the last, but I think this one may hold up for a long time. And it's honestly a very unusual thing when the Democrat has way more money to spend than the Republican. This is one of the largest money disparities we've ever seen, and that we probably ever will see.
Regardless of the outcome of this election, because it seems very close right now, what sort of timetable do you see any sort of substantial change taking place? I know that
people are going to have to be very patient. We're dealing with perhaps not an unprecedented economic situation in terms of its depth, but the world economy is so much different. If you wanted to compare this with 1987 and the recession then, or the Carter years, or the Great Depression, the issues are different. There are some similarities, but there are a lot of differences. I mean, we don't have protectionism in the same way that maybe it deepened the Depression. We live in a much different world. And the United States has rung up really unprecedented loads of credit. That's both within the government and without. And that's, keep coming back to the word change. Well, it's change.
And do you feel like this need for change has been a long time coming, or do you feel like it's a backlash against the Bush administration?
I think it's a generational thing that has it's like the surfer catching the wave. You had that demand for change and dissatisfaction with certain aspects of the Bush administration, but the economic downturn has just really accelerated. It has sort of picked the surfer up, and the wave is cresting.
Oh, thank you very much for coming in.
Not a problem.